helping people cope with and overcome life's challenges. This is Life Transformations with Michael Hart, certified Christian counselor and director of Ottawa's Elim Counselling Services.
Hi, I'm Michael Hart, Director of Elim Counselling Services, a Christian counseling ministry in Ottawa. And I want to thank you for tuning in to this edition of the Life Transformation Radio Show. We're a Christian counseling radio show where chains are broken and lives are transformed. So stay tuned. We have another interesting show lined up for you today. And with me in studio is Melissa. Welcome, Melissa.
Hi, Michael.
It's good having you here today. And today we'll be looking at the topic adult children of alcoholics. But just before we go into that, let me just tell our listeners a little bit more about Elim and how to contact us. Our website is Elim, E-L-I-M as in man, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com. And you can contact us by phone at 613-699-1677. I know we have been getting calls and emails from callers who have shown a lot of interest in the past show, and some people have called for further information. Some people have called just to express thanks to us for the kind of shows that we have been having. And there are some people that have reached out to help as well from us as a result of what they have heard on the show. So I'd like to thank all the listeners who have interacted with us, and thanks to all of you for listening. So today, Melissa, we are here and we are talking about another interesting topic, adult children of alcoholics.
Yeah, and I think this is a topic that isn't discussed very much, and hopefully we can shed some light to listeners about the experiences of people who've grown up in these type of households. And you've pulled out a biblical example, I think, of how alcohol can affect families. Do you mind sharing it with the listeners?
Well, the story that I have in mind today is a story about Noah, and it's from Genesis chapter 9, verse 20 onwards, and it says, Noah, a man of the soil, proceeded to plant a vineyard. When he drank some of its wine, he became drunk and lay uncovered inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father's nakedness and told it to 2 of his brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it across their shoulders. Then they walked in backward and covered their father's nakedness. Their faces were turned the other way so that they would not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine and found out what his youngest son had done to him, he said, Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers.
So just to clarify, Michael, are you saying Noah suffered from alcoholism? I don't, just to clarify for the listener, just so we don't get any theologians calling in with hate mail.
Yes, let's clarify that right from the beginning, right? We are not saying from this passage, we don't have enough here to say that Noah was an alcoholic, but I think we can see from this passage that drunkenness creates a lot of issues in family. And some of the issues that we see right there right away is that the nakedness of Noah created some kind of sexual immorality, because the word there that is used for nakedness doesn't simply mean that Noah was naked. It actually implies that there is some kind of sexual immorality that was at stake there, and it was probably because of the state that he was in, because of his drunkenness. We see also that it created a sense of secrecy, where we had the brothers trying to cover up their father's nakedness, 2 of the brothers. And we also see this in homes where there's alcoholism. There's a lot of cover-up. There are families in which they can't have, friends over because dad will turn up drunk, or dad might drink while the friends are there and become drunk. So the family try to covers that up. Children are told never to talk about the alcoholism in their family. So there's a lot of secrecy, just similar to this passage, that are sometimes as a result of drunkenness. We see also that there was a curse that was placed on one of the son. On one of the sons. Ham was the son, but Canaan was actually the son of Ham. That Noah placed the curse on. So there was actually a curse that resulted on the descendant as a result of something that happened while Noah was drunk. So let me just clarify by saying I'm not saying that Noah was an alcoholic in the classical sense of the word. I'm just saying that drunkenness, this passage is a good example, from a springboard from which to talk about how drunkenness create issues in family. And so when we talk about children, adult children of alcoholics today, we'll be talking a lot about some of the characteristics of those children and some of the issues that these children have as a result of the curse that is placed on them by their fathers.
Mm-hmm. And I want to start off by clarifying that curse piece and having a little bit of a talk about that. We saw in the story of Noah where the curse was placed, and there may be people listening today who've grown up in households with parents who suffer from alcoholism, who may feel that they're cursed because of their parents' actions. Does God curse these children?
No, God does not put a curse on children for the sins of their parents. However, when the Bible says, as I have talked about in another show on generational curse, if you want to listen to that podcast, we talked about the scripture where God said He visits the sins of the parent on the children to the third and fourth generation. The word visit there doesn't necessarily mean that God is putting the sins on the children. The word that is used in the Hebrew could actually mean also that God observes or He looks on. So what God could be saying in that scripture is that He is observing how when the parents indulge in certain lifestyle and certain sins, that it has an effect on the children to the third and fourth generation. So it's not that God curses these children, or that these children are somehow placed under a curse, but it's that there is an effect, there is a negative effect that sin has on the descendants of people who commit these sins.
So you talk about that there is an effect on the children.
Right.
So in what way are children affected by growing up in a household with an alcoholic parent?
Well, before we get into the specific effect, let me just look at what alcoholism does when a parent, what it does in the household when a parent becomes alcoholic. We see that when a parent is alcoholic, it means that there is an ever increasing amount of time that is spent with the alcohol. As a person goes through what we call habituation in addiction, where they can't have the same buzz from the same amount of drinking, they start indulge in more and more and more drinking time. So what this in effect do is to take away precious time from the children. So children of adult alcoholics sometimes have this sense of being abandoned by the parent because there is time spent drinking, which takes away time from interaction and family fun time. There is also time spent in recovery the day after drinking, in which the parent who drinks is not quite him or herself, and so that takes away time. We see also that sometimes drinking causes parents to miss significant events in children's life. So things like a graduation, a sport day or an event in which a child is performing, because of the drinking and the effects of the alcohol, the parent is absent from those events. So this in turn leads to the child having sense of abandonment, low self-esteem, because I wasn't important enough. The feeling is I am not important enough to dad or to mom for them to be at this event. The child doesn't understand that is because dad is intoxicated. All the child knows is that they're being abandoned, that their dad or their mom is not there for significant events in their life, which impacts them psychologically. And I have sad stories that I have heard of in my practice of children, adult who are now adult, still hurting from events that dad or mom was not at. Sad stories of even paying for their parents' tickets because they wanted so much for that parent to be there to see them at that event, and being so disappointed and broken-hearted because despite their best efforts to get their parents there, to have that kind of a connection and a bond, the parent still did not turn up because they became drunk and was not able to make it.
I also think a household with someone who's suffering from alcoholism could probably be very dramatic, depending on how they experience the effects of alcohol. Do you see that as well, where sort of fiery outbursts or things like that, because you can't really control your behavior when you're so intoxicated?
A lot of times, for some alcoholics, not for all, but for some alcoholics, there is this tendency towards escalated emotions. So more outbursts of anger, rage. Sometimes in the state of drunkenness, there are parents who have become physically abusive to their spouse and to their children. So children sometimes live in this state of fear, not knowing which dad is going to come home. Is it my loving, kind, compassionate, caring father, or is it going to be the monster who yells at me and tells me that I am stupid and I am no good, and who hits me and hurts me? So children live in this very perplexed state of not knowing what to expect. And we see sometimes even the non-alcoholic spouse will go through the same kind of stress, waiting to see what version of their spouse is going to enter the door. Is he or she going to be drunk again? And so there is just a lot of chaos that is created, and sometimes a lot of drama and heightened tension because of those uncertainties and the turmoil that follows from the drunken state.
And so for the purposes of today's show, you've highlighted that we're talking about adult children. And we've talked about sort of in those examples, the environments of which these adults are brought up. What are the long-term effects of that type of upbringing?
So when we think of the long-term effects, we can refer to maybe some of the research that has been done that talks about how alcoholism affects children in the long run. And one of the things that we find from research is that one research tells us that that children of alcoholics has a 4 times greater risk of becoming alcoholics themselves. So one of the long-term effects is that children who grew up in household where alcoholism was a part, that they run the risk of becoming alcoholics. We also see that children who grew up in alcoholic household, they have more of a likelihood to die young. They have more of a likelihood, research tells us, to have suicide attempts, to be involved in drug addiction, to have mental illnesses, and even things like life expectancies research shows are sometimes shortened for adult children of alcoholics. So we see from the research that there are a lot of negative outcomes as a result of being from in a household where your parents or one parent was alcoholic.
Do you ever see effects when these children grow up having lived in this household with a parent suffering from alcoholism? Do you ever see effects in their marriage relationships as adults?
Yes, I think there's a number of subtle ways in which this plays out, and I can just give a few examples. Before I go into that, I just want to welcome the listeners who may have just joined us. If you have just joined us, you're listening to the Life Transformation Radio Show, and my name is Michael Hart of Elim Counselling Services, and with me in studio today is Melissa Waggott, and we are talking about adult children of alcoholics. And so you have just asked me about what are some of the ways in which the effects manifest themselves in adult relationships, whether when these children grows up and they now become
a husband or a
husband
wife.
or a wife. So I think we have alluded to one before where we talk about the drama that exists in some family. People who grew up in such households sometimes become addicted to that kind of a conflict environment. So even if they're not alcoholics themselves, they tend to gravitate towards situations in which there is high drama and high conflict because it fits very well the template that they grow up with.
It's what they're used to, I guess.
It's what they're used to. So it's possible that they now have families in which there is a repetition of the high conflict, the drama that went on in their household. We see also that children who grew up in that household can develop a kind of rescue mentality, where they are seeking, it's as if they are seeking to rescue or they're trying to find someone to help. Because they grew up in a household where dad or mom was alcoholic and a lot of energy was spent, trying to be better in hope that maybe mom or dad would stop drinking. So children lived in this magical kind of world where a lot of children think that they have this internal power that maybe if I do ABC, mom or dad will stop drinking, or mom and dad will love me more.
And in a lot of ways, these children almost become the caregivers.
They become the caregivers in a lot of sense. So such children often grow up to become caregivers in their adult relationships, where they find people that are very needy or people that have addictions, people who are alcoholics. And so they're gravitating towards people whom they're trying to fix.
And do you find their desire to fix others is at a detriment to themselves? Because sometimes you think, well, wanting to help someone else is a good thing.
Absolutely.
But is it at a detriment to themselves as a person? Is that the problem?
Absolutely. I think a lot of times it ends up being detrimental because there's a difference between having compassion on others and caring for others and feeling that you have to rescue someone. The first is there's a feeling of empathy because of what the person is going through, and yes, you might try to help, but when you become a rescuer, it's as if you committed all your resources to helping this person, and it takes away from your own well-being. So when we see a rescue relationship, we see sometimes where the person who grew up in an adult home takes on a relationship where they're trying so hard to save their partner that they become emotionally exhausted. They put themselves in situations where they're abused over and over and over again. They do not have the intestinal fortitude to set boundaries or to say, I will not permit myself to be treated this way, because they have this intense desire that to fix. So if I just try harder, if I just do more, if I hang in this long enough, then I'm going to be able to fix this person. So I know I might be talking to someone out there today who you're from a background where your parents were alcoholic, and now you have found yourself in this abusive situation where you may have been persisting in for years, and maybe you have been hanging on and hoping that the person would change, but you are seeing that it's just becoming worse and nothing is happening, nothing is changing. If this is the case, it's important for you to see that you can't fix that person. You can't make that person better. You have to take steps to put boundaries in place between you and that person, to take steps to help that person to see that there is no longer a codependent relationship between you and them, but that you are they need to take responsibility for their actions and for helping themselves, and that you are going to take responsibility for looking out for your own well-being. Because what happened, Melissa, in those kind of dance of death, I calls it, is that it just gets progressively worse over the year. Like, these people are in step. One person is alcoholic or abusive, or the other person is the caregiver, and they keep thinking it will get better. But what I see in my practice is that when you examine some of these situations, what you're seeing is a train that's spiraling down track into a precipice that is going towards disaster, and the people on board is not making any effort to get out.
That's quite the metaphor there to describe that. So we've just talked about how your personal relationships can often be affected if you've grown up in a home with a alcoholic parent. Do we ever see how growing up in these type of environments impact people professionally and maybe in the work environment?
Yes, absolutely. There are actually symptoms that plays over in the work environment as well. So for one thing, that we know that sometimes adult children of alcoholics have a hard time dealing with authority figures. Because if you think about it, the authority figure represents dad or represents mom, and the authority that they know is someone who is abusive, is someone who is out of control. They learn all of those lessons about authority figure from watching their alcoholic father or mother, someone who cannot be trusted. So we find that in the workplace, a lot of time we have these spillovers where these adult children of alcoholic will have a hard time taking correction from authority figures, because any correction, any suggestion feels like a kind of abuse. They become overly sensitive. They sometimes feel if they're criticized for a simple mistake, it's as if they're hearing the echoes of their alcoholic father or mother telling them that they're no good, that they're a failure, that they will never amount to anything. And so they're likely to take this simple criticism very hard, and may sometimes even become depressed and withdrawn from that person just because the person made that kind of a simple criticism. We see also that these people sometimes have a hard time asserting themselves.
Yeah, so they can't stand up for themselves because they didn't have that opportunity. Yes. To practice that in a safe environment growing up. That's very difficult.
And they learn that it's futile growing up, right? Because there's nothing that you can do. We talk about children living in this magical world where they can fix everything. So if you have that kind of a hope growing up, and you're constantly meeting with the same reality that no matter what I do,
it's not going to change anything.
It's not going to change. Dad still comes home drunk, or mom still comes home drunk, then you have a situation unfolding where they can become passive as adults. And so they're in adult relationships where they don't even bother to ask for a raise, or they don't bother to say, we talked about burnout in the last show, I can't take on any more projects because I'm at a point now where I am already overloaded. So they have this inability to assert themselves. So we also see in the workplace, to answer your question about how it manifests in the workplace, we also see that these people can take failures very, 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 very hard. In a sense, they take when they fail at something, it's as if their whole world comes crumbling down, because what their performance, what they do, is sometimes tied. Their self-esteem is tied to what they do and how they do it. So sometimes we find in adult children of alcoholics, because of their low self-esteem, any kind of failure in the workplace is devastating. That's the word I was looking for. They're devastated by any kind of failure. So there are a lot of ways in which this these kind of symptoms carries over into the workplace. If you've just joined us, you're listening to the Life Transformation Radio Show. I'm your host, Michael Hart of Elim Counseling Services. Elim is spelled E-L-I-M as in man, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com, elimcounselingministry.com. You can find out more about us by going to our website, and you can also call us at 613-699-1677. If you'd like to interact with us by Facebook or on Twitter, then you can also access those pages by going to our website, elimcounselingministry.com. And again, our phone number is 613-699-1677.
So as we come to the end of the show here, Michael, if someone's been listening today and some of the examples we've talked about are echoing with them, they've grown up in these households with parents who are suffering from alcoholism, what are a few things you'd like to say to them about how they can find freedom from the effects of growing up in such an unstable environment?
Well, I think that's a very, the answer that I give can't be any simple answer. It's a very complicated and multifaceted question, and the answer is very complicated as well. But there are just a few things I would suggest. That first of all, if you're an adult children of alcoholic, I think the first thing to admit to yourself is that you are under the influence. There are ways in which things that you're doing, the ways that you're doing it, how you're responding to authority figures, to your spouse, has something to do with your family of origin. So I think that's the very first point. The second thing to realize is that some of these things are very deeply rooted, and it's not an easy fix. Mm-hmm. So if you have grown up and you're acting out in ways, or you're repeating the alcoholic cycle, it's not as simple as saying, okay, if you do this, you're going to be okay. Mm-hmm. I would say that there might be the need to get professional help where you can make some of those connections. A very skilled therapist can help you to make some of those connections and see where it comes from. And there's a lot of power in understanding what some of your behaviors are rooted in. And once that is done, you can now begin to take steps through cognitive behavior therapy with a skilled therapist who is trained in that art to help you to systematically begin to dismantle some of those strongholds that the past is having over your life. And I think some of the groups that specialize in dealing with adult children of alcoholics, in the same way that you have adult Alcoholic Anonymous, where people who are addicted themselves goes to those groups. You have groups where for children of adult alcoholics, for children of whose parents were alcoholics, and these groups, one of the things that they talk about is that the person who are children of alcoholic must come to a place where they realize that they need to depend. One of the 12 steps is that they need to depend on a higher power to fix those challenges that they have, and that they cannot do it themselves. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a very important point in which to end this show, to say there needs to be a spiritual solution to the problem as well. And I see my signal from my producer that we're out of time, so we have to wrap it up here for Melissa. But thank you very much for helping us discuss this topic.
You're welcome.
And if you are listening to this show today, if you have listened to this show, I want to thank you for listening, and you want to ask you to stay tuned to the next show, which will be aired on CHRI at next Monday at 9:30 a.m. and we'll have another interesting show lined up for you then. Until next time, we want to thank you for listening, and we pray that God would grant you happiness in all your relationships and keep you sound in mind and pure in heart. God bless you, and thank you for listening.